Hello, I'm Michaela. I want to talk today about fear and using your fear. So, I listen to this guy, Lee Harris, and he's an energy forecaster. I was listening to his energy forecast for December. And talks about the energy of fear that's around us, running through us, and talks about using that fear, what it looks like to face it versus trying to escape it. So, trying to escape fear looks like a lot of different things that you wouldn't traditionally call fear. Things like avoidance behaviors or shutting down, reactivity, any violent speech, which can look simply like, is she kidding me? Or all the way up to actual violent speech, where you know what they're thinking, or justifications and defensiveness, or being puffed up. So avoidance and shutting down look very different also than you might think that they would. There's the more blatant avoidance, which looks like denial, avoiding a person, avoiding a conversation. Then there's shutting down, which looks very different for a lot of people too. A girlfriend and I were speaking about it today, and we're very similar in our shutting down pattern, which is interesting because we have several personality similarities. But it looks like, say there's a disagreement with a partner and it becomes a fearful situation for our ego. So we start figuring out ways that we would survive without that person immediately. You know, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? How am I going to make this much money? Like getting to the point where we don't need them. And that's a form of shutting down to the option to make it better with that person. And we do that out of fear. Another way of shutting down looks like the more typical silence or withdrawal, not talking to you or whatever. Reactivity is anything where it's a knee-jerk reaction and it's not in alignment with love. So, I mean, you have reactivity or non-reactivity that can look very calculated as well. But reactivity is something happens and you immediately respond, and it's based at ego and it's unkind. It's a lashing out. And again, that can look very minor. And it may only be mentally that we're reacting. You know, people think we're cool, calm, and collected and that we're the kindest thing on the planet. But if you could see inside our heads, we're being very reactive in there. Any type of violent speech, I already touched on that. Justifications and defensiveness. Justification looks like getting your friend to say, yeah, you're right, they're wrong. Or you justify your behaviors to whomever, which also looks like defensiveness. Well, I did that because, rather than giving the person the space to speak and then waiting until they're ready to hear what you have to say, it's more of a reaction-based behavior. And then any form of being puffed up, which can look like ego, where, you know, I'm intimidating you, I'm coming after you, aggression, and more boisterous behavior. Or puffed up can be silence, like, no, I'm not speaking to you, I'm not talking to you. Sorry, lost you for a second. And Lee talks about in his video dealing with situations that you find fearful, that kind of come and go, that you need to engage in and push through, get comfortable with, and, you know, face the music ultimately. And then there's situations that need boundaries, which he also referenced. And what that looks like is those behaviors that I just went over, but on a constant basis. And this person becomes a total energy suck for you. And it's just not, like, you're not going to be able to fix them because you're so reactive to them. And it's like, that's the basis of the relationship. There's no space And so that's how I would define a toxic situation, where you do need to set boundaries versus really trying to engage from a space of love. The loving thing to do in those situations is to learn to walk away. And so I'm referencing these behaviors, or I'm talking about these behaviors in reference to myself, or you, whoever is watching, not utilizing what I'm talking about right now to point the finger and say, oh, well, yeah, I can see how they're afraid and they treated me this way. And, again, we can't fix them, but we can work on us, on ourselves. That's all we can do, which brings it around to personal responsibility, which is your source of power. So personal responsibility in a fearful situation. So we're looking at ourselves, and for instance, I had a situation today where I needed to have a difficult conversation. It upset the person, and there wasn't the space for me to say everything that I needed to say to feel clear, to feel like we were good, because there was a withdrawal. And so that left me all day kind of dealing with it-ish. I was left to deal with it and wasn't able to clear it face to face. So I did what I could. Personal responsibility, what can I do in this situation? So I texted what the rest of what I had to say, which was in alignment with love and just kind of a hear me out. This is why I said what I said, or that I had the clearing and the feedback that I had. And asking for grace, that the courage it took for me to have that conversation in the first place is what's held on to, not taking it personal. So the what can I do that's going to get you out of a fear space, that's going to help you to move through the fear and be able to get rid of that lesson, is responding and finding personal responsibility that's in alignment with love. So your what can I do could look like, I'm going to flick him in the nose or whatever. But that's not in alignment with love, unless you're just messing around. But, you could come up with a lot of what can I do's that are not beneficial behavior. They're not in alignment with love. So we know how to get out of it, but what's the reason for all of this? Like, what's the incentive to get out of it? Why not just keep acting like an ass and do what I want? Well, if you want to evolve spiritually as a being, these are lessons. Fear is based in attachment. You're attached to something, which is going to be another video. But and these are lessons for us to move through so that we do evolve as beings. Our evolution, damn it, I'm still figuring out this videoing thing. Our evolution as a species looks like coming back together into a space of love, not further separation. So to evolve as a being, we have to go through these lessons to purify our behaviors, to purify how we're occurring to others, to bring it back into alignment with love, away from the idea of separateness. And we're going to keep getting these same lessons until we learn to face it well and move through it with love. So if, for instance, you can't stand traffic, you hate traffic always, or somebody cuts you off and that's always a trigger point for you, until you're able to just be with that being cut off and not react to it, even mentally, it's going to keep happening. And it's still going to be a thing for you until you can let it go. And that's based in fear, because the ego is fearful. Oh, that person thinks they're faster than me. They think they're better than me. I need to show them, just whatever goes on with the ego that keeps us separate and better than. For some reason, someone cutting you off in traffic triggers the ego like nothing else. So until you get to a space where you can be with, oh, all right, don't say anything else. Make space, back off a little, let it go, and change your thought patterns to something else. Or even send that person love. You've already given them grace because you're not you're not reacting. So maybe even a step further, we're sending them love. And moving through it, until you get to that space where that is your response, you're no longer reactive with the ego, you're going to keep getting that lesson. So people are going to keep cutting you off. Then when it's no longer a thing and you can just move through it, I don't know if necessarily it completely disappears or if you just stop giving a shit on a level that makes it seem like it's disappeared. But it works. And that's what this journey is. We're trying to get back into alignment with love. We're trying to grow as beings. There's definitely a spiritual evolution, revolution, whatever you want to call it. And people are waking up. People are becoming more conscious. So now what do we do? What do we do with these things that we have to deal with in the human form? Fear being the basis of all of our negative behaviors. And this is the journey. We experience the discomfort and the suffering. We go into contraction mode, protecting ourselves. We evaluate the situation. From that evaluation, are we reactive or are we able to step back and respond in love? Eventually getting to the point where we experience the discomfort and the suffering and we don't contract. There isn't a fear of it. We can just show up for it and be with it and move through it. But in the meantime, most of us are still at the contracting stage. We look at it and we say, okay, wait a minute. I can stay in alignment with love in my response to this, what does that look like? Well, love is patient. Love is kind. Love is long-suffering. We quote Corinthians at weddings, but that's not a romantic love. That's true love. Like, that's the love you have towards your checkout guy at the grocery or the toll booth. I don't know. Everybody gets that kind of love from you. It's not just your partner. It's everybody. That's true love. So getting your responses back in alignment with being patient, with being kind, with being long-suffering. That's the lesson. That's the journey that brings us more into alignment with what we're supposed to be as beings, which is connected to one another. So you can use your fear through this time. I know we're having a rough time. It's not just you. And I have to remind myself daily that it's not just me. It's there's just some difficulties going on for, it seems like, everybody, especially relationally. And so that's where a lot of fear-based behaviors can surface, and learning to use them versus running from them, and then you just keep getting the same lessons over and over. So it's a tough time, but this is the type of fire that's required for us to make that leap forward. So happy leaping. I hope you're able to make your way through gracefully, and if not, having the grace towards yourself to say, all right, start again tomorrow. There's always a basket of do-overs, as a friend of mine has always said. So take care. See you next time.